This is a reading from my book called Pals, Part 1. I also have Pals Part 2. Both of them are now on the market. This one is called, both books are short stories. This one is about my first day in elementary school at Audubon Elementary in Dubuque, Iowa. It's called Randy Has a Rock. I don't remember the name of my kindergarten teacher at Audubon Elementary School, but I do remember the coat room, the huge clock on the wall, the desk with inkwells, and the picture of Abraham Lincoln over the door. I also remember a lot of noise, as I was supposed to be which was supposed to be expected from 5-year-old kids. We recited the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag hanging next to the door. Why, we had inkwells as anybody's guess. We didn't know how to print. We didn't know what ink was used for in those days. The coat room spanned the entire width of the classroom except the two open doorways at each end. We had our own hooks where we hung our parkas and neatly placed our snow boots. The hooks were black metal, and the wood supporting them was made of oak. We were pretty good at following directions, lining up single file and marching into one doorway only to shed our outer garments and then march out the other side. In all other seasons besides winter and rainstorms, the area was never used. I suspect all that marching was somehow left over from World War II. The north end of Dubuque, Iowa was full of two things: veterans and people of German descent. There were family names like Cooperschmidt, Udelhoven, Knernschild, Schmidt, Schmaltz, Wagner, and many others. We learned to stand up straight, march in unison, and never, ever question authority. And then the huge wooden door squeaked open, and there entered the meanest, scariest, and strongest woman I ever saw. Elsie Schrader was our principal and seemed to even frighten the teacher, who stopped reading to us and stood up at attention. She welcomed us to Audubon and told us the rules as she had to other students for the past 40 years. We sat on the floor looking up at her and unable to stop staring at her wide nostrils and thick nose. I was seated in the front of the semicircle and had to strain to look up at this giant woman. I noticed a hardened booger right there in her left nostril. I thought it was funny. Each time she started a new sentence, that booger moved back and forth like a baseball card hooked with a clothespin to the spokes of my bicycle. It made a rat-tat-tat noise. She had stump-like fingers and fat calves that were draped from above with a black dress that dropped midway to her ankles. She wore black shoes with wide heels that supported her 250-pound frame. The inlaid oak floor crunched and bent, but did not break as she sauntered among us. She had huge, thick lips that went from below her nose to her chin. Those big lips must have helped her to enunciate each and every symbol. She spoke slowly and with great intention. She smelled like a combination of my musty-smelling cellar and burnt sauerkraut. She showed us the dreaded wind whipper. The wind whipper was a 4-inch wide paddle with 6 holes cut into its 14-inch length of solid oak. It was tapered at the end, allowing a firm grip with which to paddle children. We had heard stories about that paddle from our older siblings or kids in the neighborhood. Its name was derived from the fact that when she swung it through the air, one could hear the wind blowing through the holes. Swish, swish. Now, I know I will never have to use this on any of you children, she said, slapping it into her left palm while gripping the handle with her white-knuckled right hand. She continued, but if you ever sass off to your teacher while here at Audubon, I will burn your tiny butts with huge blisters. Do you understand me? Yes, Miss Schroeder, we all said in unison, as if we were saying the Pledge of Allegiance. She picked at her nostril with her thumb and index finger, turned, and left the room. The hardened oak door closed with a bang as the hinges squeaked behind her. We continued hearing the wind whipper slap against her hand in the hallway like she was looking for prey. About that time, George Schmidt let out a shriek. "Look, teacher, Randy has a rock, and it stinks." I looked over to see Randy Schuckelmeyer holding not up a rock, but a turd. When old lady Schroeder came in to talk with us, she literally scared the shit out of him. What had been a neat and orderly semicircle of 5-year-old boys and girls turned into a stampede like on the Roy Rogers television show. 3 girls gave out simultaneous high-pitched thrills that could have caused a dog to go berserk. 2 others ran into the coat room to hide. I saw one boy gagging, another laughing and pointing at Randy, while a third cupped his mouth with his hands and yelled, "Turd! Everybody run!" All the kids were screaming, running in circles, pointing, gagging, or laughing. I didn't think Randy was too intelligent for a 5-year-old. He thought it was funny. He loved the attention. He was actually running around the classroom with that turd in his hand. When he cornered someone, he held up his morsel, laughed, and pushed it toward their face. That created even more pandemonium. Even though I was only 5, I had respect for authority. I suspect it was from my past experiences and fear of the consequences if I did not obey. My dad taught me that. My old man was so frightening that when he yelled at one of us kids, all the others fell to the floor simultaneously. He could stop an attacking, snarling, and growling dog in its tracks with just his index finger. His voice could rumble and vibrate anything hanging on the walls 2 stories above the cellar where on a regular basis he fought with the fuse box. The heck with all those starving kids in China come supper time. If we held food in our mouths and refused to swallow, he would growl like an ogre hiding in an empty 50-gallon barrel. His commands created a fear that caused us kids to develop suction from our rectums up to our throats, and that was more powerful than a new Electrolux vacuum cleaner. Immediately our food shot a beeline for our guts. We feared him, and consequently we knew to follow orders. That fear I had of the old man was the same fear I felt about Principal Schroeder. When the class went nuts, I stayed put. I sat perched on the floor with my legs bent at the knees, exactly where I was when she left the room moments prior. I wanted to be certain that she knew I was not involved. Aha! The only change in my posture was that now I covered my nose and buried my face between my knees. One thing I knew by age 5 was to pick your battles and be certain a whipping was worth the action. Just as the teacher reached Randy with a huge wad of paper towels, in came Miss Schroeder. She glanced at me for a split second and screamed, "All right, you children, sit down, now." I was impressed with the reaction. It was just like at home. 21 kids fell to the floor immediately. Those kids were spread out in the room like dead soldiers on a battlefield. There would have been 23 children, except the 2 girls in the coat room who stood and peeked out at the action, ran back in and hid again. Randy was standing and was being cleaned up by the teacher. Watching the kids fall to the floor reminded me of Penny and Sky King buzzing villains with their airplane as they did every Saturday morning on television during the Sky King show. Inevitably, the villain always gave up, just like my classmates. When Principal Schroeder heard what happened, she did not paddle Randy. I suspect she was smart enough to realize the wind whipper would be covered in poop. I figured she also knew when to pick her battles as if a whipping was worth the action. Randy was taken to the office and stood there silently until his mother could walk across the street from their home and bring clean clothes. That single event made me become a thinker before each time attempting to break the rules in life. Here's a cowboy poem. There once was a cowboy named Clyde He fell through the hole in the privy and died. Clyde had a brother, and he fell through the other, and now they're both interred side by side. Again, the book is called Pals, Part 1, and you can find it on my website at www.davidnelsonauthor.com.